Hey guys, it's Mike from Eldorado Guitars, and today I'm here to talk to you a little bit about the Headfirst Cali. Let's check it out. So this is an awesome amp, the Headfirst Cali by Jason Tong from Headfirst Amplification in Melbourne, Australia. I'm really stoked to have what I think is one of the first ones of these in the US. Previously, you guys may have known Jason from Headfirst as being a do-it-yourself kind of guy. He sold schematics and parts and things like that, and then you got to build your own amp. But now, Jason is doing some building of his own, and so he custom built me this Headfirst Cali at the end of 2021 going into 2022. I just want to walk you guys through a couple of things about the amp I really like and talk about that. A couple of things about the amp that maybe I might change, and then kind of give you some comparisons against some of the other amps that are in here. So first thing first, what is the Headfirst Cali? So really, this is a lean into diode clipping. So if you like Jose style amps and you love diode clipping in your signal path, then the Cali is for you. It's basically a full dive into diode clipping. Some amps, like, I've got a bunch of Friedmans over here, a big fan of Dave Friedman and his work, right? But the sat switch is kind of more like a feature on his amp, right? It's really not a diode clipping amp. It's just like, hey, if you want some diode clipping, you can turn this on. Jason has kind of gone the other way and been like, yo, this is a diode clipping amp first and foremost. So what Jason has created is basically two channels that have three different options for clipping. No clipping, Zener clipping, or transistor clipping. And those kind of get more aggressive as you sort of go up there. There's a bunch of other interesting features in the amp as well. Mine is a 3-channel version. So I elected to turn the simple clean on this amp in lieu of the response knob. So I'll talk more about that in a second. But there is a simple clean on mine. So you'll hear that it's really, I don't think it's going to blow you away. It's not like a 68 twin reverb or something, right? But it is a really nice clean sound, especially I'm going to add a little bit of chorus here from my Boss CE5. And you'll hear it actually sounds really great. Cool, right? A nice little clean channel, great if like you're in a cover band or if you're like me and you grew up in the 90s and you really need that clean, right? For the whole like kind of, quiet verse, loud chorus kind of thing, it works. But we're really all here, I think, for channels 2 and 3, which are the diode clipping channels. So like I said, Jason has really leaned into the diode clipping here. And so what you're going to see is basically two channels that are identical, but they're kind of labeled differently. So let's flip over to the amp and I'll show you what I mean. So here you're going to see our two channels. Jason calls them master and solo. So there's two different channels. And then you've got a bright switch for each, bright 1, bright 2. And you've got a gain style for each. Gain style 1, gain style 2. And you can control the volume of each channel. Now each channel does share the gain, so gain 1, gain 2, and each channel does share the EQ section, which is over here. As well as the variable negative feedback, which is over here. So a lot of different options for how you want to set this up. Right now, I've got it set up on the master for Zener clipping with the bright switch engaged, medium brightness. And then for channel 2, the solo channel, I have it with transistors, but it's also with the brightness engaged. So let's kind of hear sort of what those sound like. So what you heard on the intro was the second channel. I did have a little bit of delay on in the intro that was coming from my dispatch maker by Earthquaker Devices here, but I have turned that off. So any reverb you're hearing is being added through the UA aux box, through their kind of professional reverb. I'm just using the default, I think it's called pristine room setting. So it's a very just clean, straightforward reverb, and that's really all you're hearing. Otherwise, everything else is just the amp. So let's check out channel 2. You can kind of get an idea for what it sounds like. It's got a really great sound, nice, bright, aggressive, really kind of has that old Van Halen kind of DNA, right? So like, if you like Friedmans, but you say like, maybe I wish sometimes they're a little bit brighter and had a little more bite, this might be the amp for you, right? Really great for old stuff like that, like. So very cool sound, right? Like really bright, really aggressive, in your face. If you love that kind of old Brown sound or just 80s stuff, it's really, really, really good for all of that. Channel 3 I have set up for the transistor setting. So the transistor setting really just adds more gain, more saturation, more compression. I really love the transistors for solos. I mean, if you're trying to play any kind of lead, the transistor setting is amazing because it adds so much compression. Everything you do just flies off the fretboard. So like, let me go ahead and switch that on and you'll hear what I'm talking about. I mean, even a couple of the spots where I think I screwed up, it still sounded pretty awesome because everything just flies off the fretboard, right? So I really like that transistor mode. I think it's very, very cool and definitely an added bonus on this. Now, you might be wondering, Mike, do I have to use diode clipping? Could I turn the diode clipping off? Like, what does that sound like? Totally. So, like, let me flip over to the amp and I'll show you. If I wanted to turn the diode clipping off, really all I would have to do is put it in the center here for gain style. But the volume is going to jump up, so I'm going to turn the master down a little bit. When you engage diodes, it reduces the volume of the amp by about 40%. So you are going to hear that. I'm also going to set the brightness to the center. And this is really kind of like sort of your kind of stock plexi sound that Jason, Jason's version of it basically. So let's check that out. Sound, but definitely very different, right? Much less aggressive, less gain, less compression, right? And one thing I do like to do with this is I do like to switch the bright switch on for this. So like, for example, if I turn the bright switch on here, and that's all I will do for right now, you're going to immediately hear a large change in gain. And if you're wondering why, it's because bright switches not only add brightness, they allow more signal through. So you're actually going to hear an increase in gain here as well, which is really cool. So very cool. I think it's really cool for like an old Aerosmith kind of sound, right? Like if I turn the gain up just a little tiny bit more, like maybe I'll go ahead and turn this up to like, you know, just shy of 8 and maybe just shy of 8, right? And if I do this, you're going to hear like kind of that old Aerosmith sort of sound, which is really cool. I also think this channel is great for boosting. So for example, if you like that rhythm sound, right? So if you just like, you know. If I add just a simple boost, I'm going to turn on the Xotic Super Sweet, right? If I add a boost to this, you're going to immediately hear this thing just jump to life, right? Sorry about some of my finger slips there. It's very hot in here. I'm sweating. But, you know, this is a great channel for boosting, you know, doing lower gain stuff. And like I said, I would just recommend kind of flicking that bright switch over a little bit, and it'll really take this channel to another level. Now, one thing that I think is also very cool about this amp, and then I'll get into a couple of the things that I would change, is the variable negative feedback. So one of my things that is really kind of become a must for me on most of my amps is the ability to change the variable negative feedback. And what that will really do is it will enable you to change the feel and the kind of depth of the sound. So first things first, let's switch back to where we were. So I'm going to put the gain style back to clipping. I'm going to lower the gain back to where it was, and I'm going to increase the master back to where it was. I'm also going to turn the bright in the center here. And I think this will more or less take us back to where we were. Let's check it out. Okay, more or less I think that's where we were. So let me show you how the negative feedback affects this. And again, I don't like to make my videos about every kind of switch and knob, but I think that this is pretty cool. So right now I have it on the most tame setting, which actually is over here on where it says hair. You'll see it's on the right. This is the most tame. So the volume is just a little lower, maybe about like 5 or 10%. And the kind of sound is a little less present. It's a little less in your face, right? So here it is. Now let me put it on the medium setting, which is actually all the way on the other side, I think. So let's go ahead and do that. And then I think the center is the most, if I remember correctly. So let's check that out. So as you can hear, it really drastically changes the sound and the feel of the amp, right? So that's really important. It changes the feel. And that's something I can't convey to you in a YouTube video. Speaking of the feel, that's really, I think, one of the best things about this amp. This amp feels awesome under your fingers. I mean, it feels great, especially with either of the clipping modes. I think with the non-clipping mode, you know, yeah, you can get a similar sound, right, from you know, a Marshall or a Friedman or whatever. But I think those two clipping modes that Jason has here are really just white lightning. I mean, that's kind of what I jokingly call this amp, right? I mean, it's like this thing just catches fire under your fingers. everything you do, every little trick, everything just works out, right? Especially with that transistor mode, it really just jumps to life. Now, one thing I do want to show you, and then I'm going to switch guitars, is this can, you know, we've been doing a lot of like 70s and 80s kind of rock, but this can do more 90s stuff. So let me show you what I mean. I'm going to go ahead and flip back over here. Let's say I want it more of like a 90s sound, right? What I would recommend doing is like, okay, let's go ahead now, and what we will do is I will put the variable negative feedback kind of in the middle. I'm going to go ahead and turn the treble down a little bit. I'm going to turn the mids down a little bit. I'm going to turn the bass, I'll probably leave about the same. And maybe I'll do something like increase the gain just a bit. So let's increase the gain just a bit here. And you're going to hear that this actually comes out to like a really nice 90s sound if you like stuff like old Stone Temple Pilots and whatnot. This really, you know, old Pearl Jam, which I think I played a little bit of in the intro, right? This really works nicely, so. So really cool 90s sounds out of this amp as well. So very, very versatile. Pretty much anything from like the 60s to the 2000s really is on tap in this amp. If you mess around with the volumes and the switches and the brights and the negative feedback and even on all the way on the back there's a depth knob, right? There are a ton of options for how this amp can sound. Now let me go ahead and I'm going to switch over here for a second. I'll switch over to a Les Paul, so give me just a moment here. I'm going to put you on the amp here for a second while I pop over. I'm going to switch over here to a 2007 Les Paul Custom. I'm selecting this guitar for two reasons. Number one, I want to show you guys something with a totally different guitar, right? I mean, obviously a Les Paul and a Strat are about as different as it gets, right? And then I also want to show you this because this guitar is tuned down to E flat. So it'll show you kind of what more of like a detuned kind of sound is. Now, we were dialed into that 90s sound. Let's see how it sounds. My guess is it's not going to be very good, but let's, you know, kind of just take a look here. I'll go ahead and let's play this. It's very woofy, very aggressive, very hot. So let's go ahead and fix that. So first things first, I'm going to bring the hair back down because I think that that's probably going to make things a little bit more under control. I'm going to go ahead and increase the treble a little bit. I could maybe even play with the bright switch if I wanted to, but I'm going to avoid that for just a second. And then let's go ahead and dial the gain down a little bit because these pickups are much hotter. That Strat, I think the pickups are only 8 something in the bridge and 7 something in the neck. This Les Paul is 16, I think, in the bridge and 7 or 8 in the neck. So I'm going to go ahead and actually even bring the bass down just a little bit. And then let's kind of check out what this sounds like and we can kind of see. Probably would also help if I was in tune. Give me just one second. I actually did tune this before I did this, but it has apparently gone out of tune in the 10 minutes we were recording this video. Welcome to owning a Les Paul, by the way. That's kind of why nobody really likes to use them live anymore, because they don't stay in tune. All right, so let's check out this sound. A totally different sound, right? Much thicker, much darker, a lot more mid-range, you know. I feel like if you really tried, like, let me go ahead and try and dial something in here. I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to turn on a bright switch. I'm going to turn the treble down a little bit. I might even turn the presence down a little bit. And I'm going to scoop the mids just slightly. And let's kind of see how this sounds. So let's see. I'm going for like a, maybe like an Alice in Chains type thing here. Right? So very easy to get like a lot of different sounds out of this. I mean, I think that sounded pretty awesome, right? So I think this amp really sounds great, and probably one of the biggest features I like about it is it's sensitive to guitars, right? You can hear the difference between the Strat and the Les Paul, right? Had to totally change the EQ, totally change the sound, but from both guitars, I could get a lot of different sounds, and all of them were professional quality, excellent sounds, right? So kudos to Jason, hats off to you, man. This amp kills. Another feature of this amp that I really like, and then I'll get to a couple of shortcomings, is that it sounds great through a lot of different speakers. So Greenback, V30, both sound killer, but also sounds really good through creambacks. I've got a cabinet down there with the Celestine Alnico cream. Sounds awesome. All right, sounds really, really good. So a lot of versatility kind of buried in this amp. Now, if I can talk about a couple of things that I would change about this amp, a couple of things kind of come to mind. So the first thing that comes to mind is in regard to the variable negative feedback, which is over here on the left-hand side. Remember my hair knob here. I think I may have mentioned this earlier, but when I elected to get the clean channel here, I didn't, I think, fully understand that I was giving up the response knob. And like I mentioned, the response knob is your variable negative feedback. So in place of that knob, Jason has given you the three-way hair switch here. So definitely very cool, right? And I'm glad he did that, but you do lose that knob. So kind of just like a little something to sort of think about, right? That if you want that clean channel, you're going to give up that response control, and you're going to get the three-way toggle with the 3 preset values instead. So, you know, kind of maybe you should decide what's worth more, to be the control over the response, or is it worth more to have the clean channel, right? That's one kind of decision that you'll have to make. Another thing that maybe I would change about this amp is the location of the depth control. So right now the depth control of this amp is in the back. And, you know, look, I know if I had my amps on a cabinet and it was just like kind of a regular half stack situation, it might not be that big of a deal to reach around to the back of the amp and turn the knob. But as is with the way I set things up here, it's a really big pain in the butt to get to things on the back. It's actually one of the things I dislike most about my Friedman BE100 Deluxe is that the power and standby switches are on the back, and a lot of Dave's little switches for the kitchen sink stuff is on the back. So this kind of is the same thing with the Cali, right? Like that depth knob is very cool and great, especially for a guitar like a Les Paul, because this has so much low end, right? So the depth control really is great because I can control how much depth I want. Maybe on this guitar I want a little less, and maybe on the Strat I want a little more, right? But it's all the way on the back, which is kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm not going to show you that knob right now because it's just getting back there is a pain. But if I could change that about this amp, I probably would, right? One other thing maybe that I might change about this amp is I kind of partially wish it was 100 watts. I know you're like, Mike, it's 50 watts. 50 watts is really loud. And it is, but we lose a lot of volume by turning on the clippers, right? So when I turn on the Zener clipping, the volume drops by like about 30 to 40%. And when you turn on the transistor clipper, it drops even further. It's like 50%. So really, even though this is a 50-watt amp, you really have to get a lot of master. You can see, like on mine, the master is turned up very, very loud, right? Now, I will say on the back of the amp, because I'm using the effects loop, the effects return is the master system volume for this amp. But you can see I kind of had to set everything pretty high. I think the system volume at the back, the return is set on, I think, 8. And then I've got these two at like 9, right? So, and that's just to match the volume of these other amps that are in here when I'm going into the aux, right? So I think like if I had to do it again, I would probably make it so that it was 100 watts. That way I knew I had enough headroom. Now that said, if you set it up the way I have it set up right now, there is extra headroom, so I'm not tapped out. So let me show you what I mean. So for example, I've got down here my Boss PQ4, the parametric equalizer pedal. By the way, killer pedal, totally worth the $200 or whatever they cost. It's amazing. And I've got it in the effects loop so that I can use it as a boost. There's a little bit of EQ on it, so you're going to hear the EQ kind of change, but I just want to show you that there is additional headroom. Even though I've got everything matched, there is a lot of headroom. So just let me show you really quickly. Right, so there is extra headroom in the amp, but I just think like, I'm nervous about taking this amp to like with a drummer or something, right? Because I'm afraid that maybe there might not be enough clearance. There might not be enough headroom to really get over a drummer if you're not miking. So, I can't really back that up right now because I have not played live since COVID, but I kind of sort of wish it was 100 watts, right? So maybe that's something you can talk to Jason about if you want to order one too. And the final thing, maybe I'll just give you like kind of one last thing about this amp, which is that the gain knobs are cascading. So you will see that there's kind of 2 gain knobs here, a 1 and a 2. They do function kind of together. So you will hear, like, for example, if I go ahead and turn the gain on and I'll turn the gain down on both, you'll hear. And then you have a choice to bring up the first gain, which will give you one kind of sound. Or to bring up the second gain, which will give you a different kind of sound. It's a little more muted, it's not quite as bright. Or you can bring them both up, right? Or put them both wherever you want and get a completely different sound. So just be aware that if you buy the amp, they kind of cascade. So it gives you some options, but just know that like if you turn gain 1 up and you're like, why don't I have enough gain? You might also have to turn gain 2 up. And I think sometimes we're not used to that because like on a Friedman or a Marshall or something, there's sometimes only 1 gain. And so just be aware that you've got to do both. That said, I really love this amp. I think this is a killer amp. Jason did an outstanding job. His customer service is second to none. He walked me through every step of the process. He gave me regular updates. I actually just saw him on Tone Talk recently. So Jason is just killing it. And if you haven't heard of him and you haven't heard of Headfirst Amplification, I really recommend you check them out. This is not a paid video, by the way. This is not a sponsorship or anything. I bought this amp from Jason with my own money. And these opinions I'm giving you are my real opinions based on the experience I had with him, right? I don't try and make money off YouTube. I don't care about making money off YouTube. Obviously, I make enough money, right? I don't care about making money off YouTube. So I'm just telling you this to kind of guide your amp purchasing. And if you're looking for a Jose type amp from a great builder who's doing something really cool and you love diode clipping, then Jason and the Headfirst Cali are your guys. So check them out, guys. And again, this is Mike from Eldorado Guitars. It's been awesome chatting with you. Take it easy. Peace.